So slightly more tactical question, I guess, than the past two. So you were talking about how LinkedIn was focusing on growing to 500,000, a million users. Taking it even smaller than that, I know, or I read at least, that you guys got your first 100 or so users both on your own personal, highly influential network. Are there any other tactics for people who don't have that personal, highly influential network to get those first 100 users into that sort of marketplace?
Well, it depends a little bit on what the business is. So for LinkedIn, it was important because you wanted to have people who were essentially aspirational in who they were looking to become or meet as an anchor part of that. And so that was the reason that was a key thing that made LinkedIn easier for me after PayPal's success than before. Now, your first users in is super important. It really depends on the shape of the specific business. If it's network businesses, you need specifically hacks to get to scale. You need specifically, like, for example, frequently network businesses get built out of other platforms. So, for example, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn, the upload your address book and send emails to a bunch of people. That's essentially the email as a platform. You're hacking that platform as a way to grow, and you need to understand how to do that. That's less easy to do now because that, of course, is, people have gotten sick of the volume of that. And back when we started it, it was rare and new and interesting and like, oh, I got this email from somebody. What's this about? As opposed to, oh, it's the fifth one today. And so you have to think about what's the unique way of doing that. And then also, part of what's usually one of the things that's really important in early stage entrepreneurship is how to tell your story. You tell your story to investors, you tell your story to early employees, you tell your story to early partners. But part of telling your story, usually how do you get press attention or media attention or social media attention is super important. So if you can think of a unique or interesting way of doing that, then that's really useful. Now, for example, a nonprofit startup that's now quite established in the US called Do Something, which is enabling teens to do philanthropic work that doesn't require capital, car keys, or parental permission. The way they hacked it a lot is they had this one kind of savant who would constantly take funny pictures that were aligned with Do Something missions, like kitten pictures and other kinds of things, figure out the right memes, and then essentially release those into social media with and here's what we're doing on Do Something. And of course, it gets shared a whole bunch because they're like, oh, that's a funny picture, and so forth. So it can be any number of different techniques, but it is one of the really key things in startups is as important as what your product or service and invention is what your go-to-market is. And so you frequently want to co-invent between those. And those first users is part of that go-to-market plan. So you want to be thinking about that is how do I do that? How do I do that well? How do I do it aggressively? Now, if it's an enterprise, B2B startup, then frequently it's like, well, who are the first couple of core customers be? Go talk to them, get the feedback from them. It's one of the things that networks like EF and venture capital networks and other things are very good at helping with because, firms like Greylock, we have literally the cell phone numbers of the Fortune 1000, chief information officers about like, hey, would you like to come and talk about this? Or we have this startup that may be relevant to you. And the reason they'll do that is they want to hear intelligence from us about like what's coming in enterprise software. So it all depends on what the specific business is, but that's a palette of the answer.